Hello my dear friends, you're in the military with Samara channel, and today we will discuss the situation in the world on the 10th of June of 2026. Today we have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, and first we're going to talk about the Crimean front line. I would like to remind you that these days both the Russians and the Ukrainians are trying to destroy the bridges of each other. According to information we have, as a result of attack that took place 2 days ago, the Ukrainians managed to damage the Cheboksary bridge. Once again, let's take a look at this video. This video was published during the 8th of June of 2026, and here we can see how exactly the Ukrainians were attacking this bridge. But we didn't have any updates on the matter whether the Ukrainians managed to deal that damage to the bridge, to destroy it, or so on. And today, during the 10th of June of 2026, we received first satellite pictures, and according to these satellite pictures, we see that most likely the bridges were destroyed. As you can see, according to this picture, there are at least 3 bridges in this area. So this is the picture by the end of the 7th of June of 2026, and as you can see, according to this picture, there was just 1 bridge in this area. So this is the situation by the 7th, but when the Ukrainians attacked the bridge, the main bridge, the Russians created a pontoon bridge in this area. And when the Russians created the pontoon bridge in this area, the Ukrainians launched another massive attack. And as a result of the second attack, the Ukrainians managed to deal significant damage both to the pontoon bridge and to the main bridge. So the Russians were forced to stop any traffic through this area due to these attacks because, as we can see, the bridges were significantly damaged. Another important thing is the settlement of Genichesk. And when talking about this territory, there is another bridge between, let's say, the southern parts of Kherson and the northern parts of Crimea, and today pro-Russian sources reported that this bridge was also damaged by the Ukrainians, and several sources confirmed that the bridge was significantly damaged or maybe even destroyed. So summarizing everything, we see that 2 out of 3 main roads that connected Crimea with the mainland were destroyed by the Ukrainians as a result of drone attacks. So once again, so this is the first road between the settlement of Melitopol. This is the M18 road that goes through the settlement of Gonchar, and the bridge of Gonchar was destroyed yesterday by the Ukrainians. This is the second bridge that the Russians used for the logistic purposes, and this road goes through the settlement of Genichesk, through the bridge, and the bridge was also destroyed. As of now, the Russians have just one area that can they use to supply and support their forces in the southern and the western parts of the Kherson region, and this road goes through the settlement of Armyansk, which means that currently the settlement of Armyansk is becoming one of the most important places for Russians through the northern parts of Crimea and through the southern part of Kherson, because if the Ukrainians are able to establish complete drone control over this territory, then most likely the Russians will not be able to bring additional forces in the direction of the western part of Kherson if something happens. And as we discussed during the previous videos, since the beginning of June, the armed forces of Ukraine made lots of attempts to check and to understand the situation around the Kinburn Spit. The Russians, during this period of time, destroyed a lot of marine boats that the Ukrainians were trying to use to cross the northwestern parts of the Black Sea. As of now, we see that all attempts from the Ukrainian side to cross the Black Sea were repelled by Russians. The ships were destroyed, but it doesn't mean that Ukrainians will not make more attempts. But the problem is, and the main problem is, that the Ukrainians don't have a lot of time. They need to carry out, if they have any plans for any landing operation or for any provocation through the western part of Kherson region or through Crimea, they don't have like months or years to do this. They have just 1 or 2 weeks before they will lose momentum. The thing is that the Russians, as a result of retaliatory strikes, the results of mirroring strikes, began bombing and attacking the settlement of Zatoka, and the most important is that the Russians began bombing and attacking the Zatoka bridge, and this is a very interesting and a very important situation. The Russians began bombing the Zatoka bridge almost at the same time when the Ukrainians began bombing and attacking the northern Crimean bridges, and on the 8th of June we received first pictures on this matter where we can see that first the Russians destroyed a ship that was located in the area of the bridge as defense belt. Later we received more videos on this matter. Here we can see how exactly the Russians were attacking the area around the Zatoka bridge, and according to information we have, as a result of attack, the Russians managed to deal damage to the bridge, but during the 8th and 9th of June of 2026 we didn't have anything that can confirm or that can show us the exact damage that the Russians managed to deal to this object of strategical infrastructure. During the 9th of June we received another video. Here we have an explosion that took place somewhere in the area of the Zatoka. But on the 10th of June we received a lot of updates on this matter, and these updates are very important. First of all, it seems that the Russians during the 8th and the 9th of June of 2026 managed to damage the bridge, but the Russians haven't managed to destroy it. So that is why during the 10th of June of 2026 the Russians made another attempt to attack the Zatoka bridge. The Russians were using Ha-59 and 69 missiles, and the most important thing is that the Russians used Ha-31P anti-radar missile. According to information we have, there were 3 anti-radar missiles that were launched by Russians, and these missiles were flying in the direction of the Zatoka bridge, but somewhere around the bridge of Zatoka. These anti-radar missiles managed to detect a radar of the armed forces of Ukraine, which was located in the area of the city of Odessa, and later we received the report that these anti-radar missiles attacked the IRIS-T air defense system, and lots of explosions were recorded through this area. And when the Russians destroyed either the entire IRIS-T air defense system or radars to the systems, the Russians began once again bombing and attacking the settlement of Zatoka and the Zatoka bridge. And for example, during the day we received additional updates and additional videos on this matter. In this video we can see the area around the city of Zatoka and the bridge of Zatoka. As you can see, lots of explosions were recorded, and the situation was indeed a critical one to the armed forces of Ukraine because they were left without air defense system. So that is why the Ukrainians were forced to use their MiG-29 aircrafts with the purpose to bring down Russian missiles that were flying in this area. During the day we received lots of videos of how Ukrainian MiG-29s were flying around the Zatoka bridge just with one purpose: to destroy and to bring down Russian missiles that were flying in the direction of Zatoka bridge. As of now we don't know for sure whether the Ukrainians managed to destroy the Russian missiles or not, but the most important thing that the Ukrainians were forced to reveal their MiG-29's positions and their aircraft and the aircraft themselves, because now the Russians, if the situation continues developing the same way, obviously during the next missile attack or bomb attack in the direction of the Zatoka bridge, and if the Ukrainians decide to use their MiG-29's aircraft with the purpose to bring down Russian missiles, the Russians most likely will use their Su-35's aircraft with the purpose to destroy these planes. So in coming days we might see lots of air clashes in the area of the Zatoka bridge, because we see and we understand that the Russians are tasked to destroy this Zatoka bridge completely, because this is going to be something like a mirroring to the situation that the Ukrainians managed to create through the northern parts of Crimea. If the Russians destroy the Zatoka bridge, the Ukrainians most likely will lose control with NATO, with the NATO and with the logistics that goes from NATO between Romania and the southwestern part of Odessa region. I would like to remind you that there are lots of towns and cities with very important port infrastructure, and if the Russians destroy the Zatoka bridge, the Ukrainians will lose significant part of logistics and supply with weapons. Another important thing, and probably the most important thing, is that during the evening of the 10th of June of 2026 we received fresh satellite pictures about the situation in the Zatoka bridge, and according to this picture at least 4 artifacts were detected. Across the bridge in Zatoka we have at least 4 artifacts in satellite photos. According to these artifacts, we see black dots along the bridge of Zatoka, which means that most likely there is definitely some damage to the bridge, but it's not critical. The crossing near Mayaki is which means that traffic is still on the bridge, but with restrictions. So it seems that the Russians, as a result of airstrikes that the Russians started on the 8th of June of 2026, managed to deal damage to the ZATOKA bridge. As of now, as we can see according to this article, traffic is still on the bridge but with restrictions, which means that the Russians will continue attacking the bridge, which means that the Ukrainians will continue using aircrafts in this area and additional air defense systems with the purpose to protect the bridge, which means that the Russians have chances to destroy the Ukraine's aircraft in this area, and to destroy air defense systems in this area as well. So it seems that the ZATOKA bridge has become something like a trap, but not for the Russians but for the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians crossed the red line by destroying the bridges through the northern parts of Crimea, and it seems that the Ukrainians didn't expect that the Russians would act so fast and that the Russians would damage significantly the ZATOKA bridge. The Ukrainians understand the value of this area, so that is why they will not count resources with the purpose to stabilize the situation and to protect this area, which means that in coming days we might see the over-concentration of aircrafts and air defense systems of the armored forces of Ukraine through the southwestern part of Odessa, which means that in coming 2 or 3 days we might see hundreds of drones of the armored forces of the Russian Federation and dozens of aircrafts of Russia in this area with just one task, with just one purpose: to destroy as many as possible air defense forces of the armored forces of Ukraine through this territory, and in the end to deal significant damage to the ZATOKA bridge or even to destroy it. So we might see very heavy clashes in this area, air clashes in this area between Russians and Ukrainians, and a lot of things depend on the ZATOKA bridge, and we will understand how the things are going to develop. Now let's move further and let's discuss another important video. During the previous 12 hours, pro-Ukrainian sources published a video of how the Ukrainians were attacking the city of Mariupol. In this video, we can see how the Ukrainians were using drones to attack the Mariupol port infrastructure, and pro-Ukrainian sources reported that as a result of this attack, the Mariupol port infrastructure was significantly damaged, and this is another red line that the Ukrainians crossed since the beginning of June, which means that in coming days we might see lots of attacks carried out by Russians in the direction of the Odessa port infrastructure, and the Russians will be tasked obviously to create a similar and mirroring situation, to make the situation when the Ukrainians are no longer able to use the port infrastructure of the city of Odessa. So as you can see, the Russians haven't been attacking neither the bridge of Zatoka nor the port infrastructure of Odessa, at least significantly, since the beginning of the special military operation, because the Russians knew that if they attack these objects, then most likely the Ukrainians would attack the northern bridges of Crimea and the port infrastructure of Mariupol and other towns. So this was something like a balance, probably the only balance through the entire special military operation. But we see that for some reason the Ukrainians, since the beginning of June of 2026, have crossed these two rules, and which means another important thing, that the Ukrainians most likely went all in. The Ukrainians went all in. The Ukrainians knew exactly what kind of consequences they would face if they do this, but they did this, which means that they have a certain plan, and which means that this plan, the realization of this plan, is limited, which means that in coming 1 or 2 weeks we might see something interesting from the Ukrainian side, and the question is whether the Russians are ready for this or not. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation with massive drone attack that was carried out by the Ukrainians during the previous 24 hours. According to the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, the Ukrainians used more than 600 drones to attack deep inside of the territory of Russia, and as a result of attack, at least 3 cities, 3 areas were damaged. The Vladimir region, according to information we have, the Ukrainians attacked this object of energy infrastructure, and this is a very important object of fuel infrastructure, because the Russians use this pump station to supply the city of Moscow with fuel. So the Ukrainians were trying to destroy this pump station with the purpose to cut fuel supply of the city of Moscow and to create a critical situation on the territory of the capital of the Russian Federation. According to different sources, this object of energy infrastructure was at least damaged. Another important area is the settlement of Cheboksary. During the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians Ukrainians attacked a very important object of military infrastructure. So this enterprise was attacked by the Ukrainians, and as a result of attack, this enterprise was significantly damaged. During the previous day, we received lots of videos on this matter, and the sources reported that this enterprise was manufacturing comet antennas, which are widely used in rockets and drones, including Shahed drones. These antennas enable the drones to maintain navigation even when radio electronic warfare measures are applied. So the Ukrainians attacked the enterprise in the territory of Russia, which is responsible for production of equipment that allows the Russians to use drones even when the Ukrainians use electronic warfare equipment, which is a very important situation. Anyway, let's wait and see how the things are going to develop next, but obviously the Russians have more, probably this is not the only enterprise that can produce this type of equipment, but who knows how the things are developing. Another important area is the city of Samara. During the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians attacked the Samara oil refinery, and as a result of attack, a fire broke out after the Ukrainians attacked the territory. And as for the Samara oil refinery is located on the way towards the settlement of Saratov, where we have the Engels airfield. So if you remember, every time before the beginning of any massive attack from the Russian side, the Ukrainians tried to attack oil refineries, oil bases around the main aircraft bases of Russia. So which means that most likely in coming 2 or 3 days, the Russians were planning to carry out another massive attack through the territory of Ukraine, but due to the attack on the oil refinery around the main aircraft airfields, we believe that the Russians may change their plans, or maybe not, who knows. Anyway, one thing is clear, that during the next massive attack, the Russians may use once again the rationing system, because today we received the report that the Russians began preparation for the next launch of the rationing system, and during the next massive attack, the Russians may use this system with the purpose to attack decision-making centers or something like this. Now let's discuss the Russian massive attack. The Russians during the previous 24 hours were attacking mainly the city of Kharkiv and the Kharkiv region. Pro-Russian sources published lots of very interesting videos. In this video we can see how the Russians were using new drones with machinery vision, and as you can see, the Russians were attacking objects of energy infrastructure. The Russians were attacking vehicles. As you can see, these drones are completely autonomous. For example, in these moments we can see that the Russians were flying above some parking site, and the machinery vision allowed the Russians to recognize regular vehicles and military vehicles. And then the Russian drone auto-navigated itself, and the Russian drone attacked just a target that was considered as a military target. So as you can see, the Russians right now began testing, or even probably using drones like Hornet, something like Hornet drones that were provided by to the armed forces Ukraine by the United States of America these days, so which means that the Russians are trying to find the balance with these systems as well. Furthermore, the Russians attacked the city of Kharkiv, and the biggest number of explosions took place through the northwestern parts of the city. 2 days ago, the Russians attacked a warehouse in this area, and as a result of attack, the warehouse was damaged but not destroyed. The fire teams managed to extinguish the fire and stabilize the situation, and it seems that the Russians made the second strike in this area with the purpose to destroy these warehouses completely. And in this video we can see an explosion, and then we can see a number of secondary explosions, which means that most likely the Russians destroyed an ammo depot. And as we can see, these days the Russians are over-focused through the northwestern parts of the city of Kharkiv. Most likely the Ukrainians have warehouses, ammo depots in this area that serve just to one purpose, to supply and support the contingent in the area of the settlement of Kazachye Lopany, where the Ukrainians right now are trying to repel Russian attacks. The Russians attack every single day in this area with the purpose to break through Ukraine's defense, and it seems that the Russians are not just attacking ZATOKA and positions of the armored forces of Ukraine in the area of the city of LYMAN, it seems that the Russians are tasked to achieve a fast breakthrough with the purpose to take under complete control this settlement as fast as possible, much faster than any other settlement through the entire line of combat contact. But as of now, we see that the clashes for the settlement of LYMAN have already taken probably 5 or 6 days, and yet we haven't received anything that can allow us to make any changes on the ground. Anyway, let's wait and see. Obviously, the Russians and the Ukrainians are trying to keep the information about the situation in this area in secret for as long as possible, but it's impossible to keep the situation about the settlement of LYMAN in secret forever. Another important area that was attacked by Russians is the settlement of Pechenegi. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians attacked a gas station in this area along T2111 road, and this is the video of the overnight attack, and this is the video that was made this morning, and here we can see the consequences of attack, and here we can see what left from this gas station, and we see that the gas station was completely destroyed. As you can see, this gas station was located along the T2111 road that goes from the cities of Cheboksary and Kharkiv further in the northeastern direction towards the most northeastern front lines of the Kharkiv region. Furthermore, during the previous 24 hours, it seems that the Ukrainians tried to bring additional reinforcements to the settlement of Veliki Burluk with the purpose to reinforce positions before the beginning of the battle for this territory, but the Russians discovered an ammo depot and destroyed it. At the same time, the Russians, due to significant problems with supply and support in the Kharkiv region due to massive attacks in the area of the city itself and around, the Russians intensified their offensive operation, and as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to break through Ukraine's defense and to shorten the distance to the settlement of Bielye Kolodets from the west and from the southwest, and these are the changes on the ground. As of the end of the 10th of June of 2026, pro-Ukrainian sources began publishing updates that the Ukrainians is the side who began counterattacks in this area, and as a result of these counterattacks, the Ukrainians managed to improve their positions. So you see that 5 months ago, when the Russians were attacking Ukrainians, the Ukrainians were attacking the Russians somewhere else, on some other direction, with the purpose to slow down the Russians. And we saw that sometimes these tactics brought results to Ukrainians. But as of the current situation, we see that the Russians begin offensive operation and the Ukrainians sometimes begin immediate counter-offensive operation. And where the Russians make changes in their favor and mappers and so on, the Ukrainians make changes in their favor as if there is a counter-offensive operation from the Ukrainian side. So this is a very interesting new tactics that the pro-Ukrainian sources began using, but let's see how these things will affect the situation on the ground and maps of different mappers. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Slaviansk-Drushkovka agglomeration. The Russians are about to finish the battle for the city of LYMAN. During the previous 24 hours, we received first changes on the ground between the dates. So this is the end of the 9th of June and this is the situation by the end of the 10th of June. And if you remember, just yesterday we were talking that the Russians, as a result of clashes, managed to break through Ukraine's defense and to infiltrate into almost 40 or 50% of the settlement, and the Ukrainians were forced to fall back. This information yesterday was provided by different military experts. Today we received first videos that can confirm that the Russians indeed managed to break through Ukraine's defense through the western parts of the settlement, and you know that this offensive operation and this breakthrough through the western parts of the city of LYMAN was expected, because if you remember, since the beginning of May of 2026 we received dozens of videos right exactly through the western parts of the city. As for the western part of the city, there is a high-rise building area, and this is something like the LYMAN Western Citadel that the Ukrainians were using with the purpose to stop or to slow down any offensive operation in the direction of the city of LYMAN from the west. So that is why during the May of 2026 the Russians were mainly tasked to destroy these high-rise building ruins and to reduce them to ruins. During this period of time we received lots of videos of how Russians were bombing these multi-story buildings, and it seems that when the Russians finished destroying these buildings, the Russians began their offensive operation because the Ukrainians were no longer able to show any resistance through the western part of the city of LYMAN, and the Russians managed to answer. And telling the truth, I believe that there should be more changes through the western part, and I believe that when talking about the Russian control, there should be more territories under control of Russians. Probably the Russians managed to break through, and it seems that in coming 2 weeks the Russians will announce control over both the cities of LYMAN and Konstantinovka. And when the Russians finish the battle for the city of LYMAN, this is going to be first of all the third battle for the city. The first 2 battles for the city of LYMAN were taking place through 2022. The first one during the first half of 2022, the second one during the Ukraine's Kharkiv counter-offensive operation. As you can see, the third battle of LYMAN will be finished in 2026, almost 4 years after. And when this happens, the Russians will continue advancing further in the direction of the river of Seversky Donets. From the city of LYMAN, the Russians will be able also to establish complete FPV drone control over the territory of the city of Slaviansk. The distance would be between 17 and 25 kilometers, which means that the Russians using fiber optic drones will be able to establish complete control over the territory, and the Russians most likely will start the river crossing operation with the purpose to attack or to tighten the noose or to tighten the pincers through the northern and the northwestern parts of the Slaviansk. At the same time, it is expected that the Russians most likely would be able to break through the Konstantinovka defenses and to begin battle for the next settlements on the line. As of the previous 24 hours, we received just small changes between the cities of Chasiv Yar and Konstantinovka, and these are the changes on the ground. The Russians, at the same time with the Konstantinovka offensive operation, also decided to cut the pocket to the west of the city of Chasiv Yar with the purpose to maintain the lines, to take these advantageous positions of the armored force Ukraine and to force them to fall back, otherwise to caught the Ukrainians in cauldron. So in coming days, we believe that the Russians would be able to maintain the lines between these settlements, and then the Russians will continue advancing further behind the Ukrainians in the direction of the villages of Popasne, Bezimenne and Izhevka. So the battle for Alexeyevka-Druzhkovka is expected to start somewhere within the next 3 weeks or something like this. And at the same time, we start receiving first updates about the Russian offensive operation in the direction of Novogrigorovka, which is something like the southwestern direction of the settlement of Druzhkovka, which means that with the Konstantinovka Druzhkovka offensive operation, we might see the Sofiivka-Druzhkovka offensive operation from the southwest. Obviously, the Russians will use all means they have, every single resource they have, with the purpose to finish the battle for the Slaviansk-Druzhkovka agglomeration as soon as possible and before winter comes. Now let's move further. As for the Zaporozhye direction, these days we continue receiving updates about the situation between the settlements of Ivanovka, Andreevka, Klivtsovo, Lesnoye. Pro-Ukrainian sources claim that the Ukrainians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to force the Russians to fall back from these territories, and most of the pro-Ukrainian sources have colored these territories under complete Ukraine control, but yet we haven't received strong proofs that this is exactly the situation. But at the same time, we received lots of videos from pro-Russian sources that confirm completely opposite situation. Today, pro-Russian sources published a video from the settlement of Tolstoye. In this video, we can see how Russians were moving through the settlement of Tolstoye, which means that the village is under complete and strong control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. With this video, the Russians were trying to show and to confirm that the reports about the Ukrainian counter-offensive operation in the city is just a media counter-offensive operation without any proofs on the ground. Anyway, let's wait and see what is going to happen next, because according to pro-Russian sources, the Russians right now are trying to improve their position significantly in the area of the settlement of Lesnoye between the settlements of Velika Mikhailovka and Gavrilovka. Obviously, sooner or later, the truth will be revealed and we will understand what exactly is happening in this area. As for the Orekhov direction, during the previous 12 hours, we received lots of updates around the city. The Russians are conducting the reconnaissance operation, and the Russians began moving in the direction of Novoandreevka and the city of Orekhov from the southwest. These are the changes on the ground between the dates. This is the end of the 9th of June, and this is the end of the 10th of June. The Russians captured several true lines, and the Russians continue advancing. And that's it for today. The Military with Samara channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.